I'm on my own this morning because Abby got some bad news about her brother very early this morning. So I'm here on my own, and I'm actually delivering the sermon that Abby prepared for this Advent Sunday. So fasten your seatbelts. Welcome to Advent Sunday, the first day of the church calendar when we begin to prepare for the coming of the Christ child among us. And most of us, when we think about welcoming a baby, imagine something gentle and joyful, perhaps a baby shower, a living room scattered with pastel wrapping paper, tiny booties knitted by a godparent, flutes of pink champagne raised in celebration. It's soft, sweet, predictable, traditional. We prepare for a child by feathering a nest, by building registries, adorning with delicate flowers. A fitting Bible verse might be from 1 Corinthians. We shall not sleep, but we shall all be changed, quoted with a wink as people remind their parents to get 8 hours sleep while they can. But the church, in her wisdom, begins Advent, the season when we prepare for the Christ child, with something altogether different. Instead of pastel bunting, last year's Advent reading reminded us of earthquakes. Instead of baby booties, this year's gospel talks of thieves in the night. And instead of the warm glow of a nursery lamp, next year's Advent Sunday will speak of the sun going dark and the Son of Man arriving with suddenness. On Advent 1, the gospel does not soothe us into sleep, it shakes us awake. And that is the paradox at the heart of this season. Advent begins not with sentimentality, but with urgency. The church year begins by speaking of its end. Before we cradle the Christ child, we are asked to watch, to stay awake, to make room not just for a baby, but for holy disruption. Not long ago, someone told me that the world was going to end this year. Maybe you saw it. It was from an article in the Economic Times entitled, "World Ending Tomorrow?" People are selling cars and quitting jobs in panic. The same frenzy bubbled up in 2017 and 2011. And it didn't start with the internet either. Medieval Christians suspected the year of 1000 might bring Christ's return. The fear rose during the Crusades, resurfaced in the Black Death, and then again at the dawn of the Reformation. Times of great uncertainty, instability, poverty, and hunger. People grasping for help and hope. And of course, it's easy for us to shrug and say, well, clearly none of them read Matthew 24, where Jesus clearly says, no one knows the day or the hour. But dismissing these predictions too quickly lets us ignore something important. The atmosphere into which the Christ child is born, and the atmosphere that always exists somewhere for someone. People were afraid. People were suffering. People were walking in darkness, hoping desperately for a light. People were waiting for God to make good on his promised return. The poet Jan Richardson writes, "The world is always ending somewhere." And we all know someone who picked up a phone call and found their entire life divided into before and after. Someone who went to the doctor and returned with a diagnosis. We know how fragile life can be, how quickly things can change, and how that change, whether small scale or large scale, can feel a lot like a world ending. In that way, Advent 1 is less like a baby shower and more like being on a plane ride with bad turbulence. This summer, flying home from my cousin's wedding in Michigan, I experienced turbulence that jolted me straight out of a nap. One moment I was asleep, the next my hands were clasped around my armrests. The captain came on the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got some rough air ahead. I'm turning on the seatbelt sign." And I thought, well, okay, that's the worst of it. But then came another drop, harder. And I looked at the flight attendants looking for their usual reassurance. They always look calm. But in this instance, they didn't look calm. When the captain came on again and said, "Flight attendants, please take your seats," that's when my stomach really flipped. At some point, I'm not sure when, I realized I'd gone from gripping the armrest to gripping hold of the hand of the stranger next to me. The whole episode lasted maybe 3 minutes, but in those minutes, something became crystal clear, the way that Advent Sunday makes things clear. We were all in it together, first class, last row, pilots, attendants, all of us in the same sky, the same storm, keeping vigil together, hoping for stability to return. Not one of us could do anything by ourselves to get out of it. And in those moments, my mind wasn't on luggage. It certainly wasn't on what I was going to make for dinner that night. All the small, urgent things fell away. What mattered was the important, not the width of my life, but its depth. Not what I was, but who I was. Advent Sunday always brings images of judgment, something I think we instinctively brace against. We hear, "Do not judge so that you may not be judged," and imagine judgment as harsh, as punitive. But Advent's judgment isn't vengeance, it's revelation. As Johnny Cash puts it, what's done in the dark will be brought to light. This is the judgment of God, seeing clearly what we tried to hide. And maybe that's why Jesus speaks of a thief coming in the night. If we knew the hour, we'd lock the doors, tidy up our lives, hide the things we don't want found, polish ourselves into illusions of control. We'd bring our very best selves forward, much preferable than to be upended in our pajamas. But the unexpected exposes what is real, what cannot be hid. And yes, it sounds frightening. Again, it's not exactly the baby shower material we were talking about. But maybe that's only if we understand Christ's return as an ending, a severing of time, instead of a completion of a story brought full circle. Stay awake is not meant to terrify, it's meant to clarify. It's the summons to return to what matters in the Christian life, to live with depth, to refuse to let fear or frenzy run our lives. It is a reminder that while we do not know the day or the hour of Christ's return, of our own upheavals, what we do know is the one who is coming. And perhaps that is the beating heart of Advent. Christ comes into a suffering and broken world, into turbulent skies, into people clutching the nearest hand and hoping for light. He comes not when we are needy, he comes not when we are ready, but when we need him. So stay awake, not in dread, but in hope, because the world is always ending somewhere. And in every ending, God is already beginning. Amen.